Welcome to episode 87 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning talking to you, as usual, from my home here in London. I'm really busy with work at the moment, but as promised, you will get 2 episodes per month, this month being October 2023. If this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, the remit is all about preserving film history. You can treat this and the other 86 episodes that came before it as an archive for your entertainment, for research material, for a book or a podcast, or even an essay. If you're writing at school or college, just remember to give me a credit. That's all I ask. You have about 1 hour of film chat ahead of you, and I hope you enjoy it. If you're a regular listener, thanks as always for joining me and for all of your support. Thanks to the lovely 112, I think it is now, of you that support the podcast via Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. I really do need your support to keep this podcast going. To make it financially viable, I reckon I need at least 150 of you total. So if there's another 38 of you out there and, would buy me a pint or a coffee if we were to meet, then please consider spending that money, about $12 maybe, for a whole year of episodes. So that's 24 episodes for $12. I think that's good. If you can't afford to do that, then, please support the podcast by telling people about it, hitting subscribe on the YouTube channel, sharing on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, Facebook, Instagram. I have redesigned the look of the podcast, so the artwork for the thumbnails has changed. It's going to be consistent now over the next 87 episodes. So please do share. I'll be posting some Instagram stories. So look for Filmumentaries wherever you go. Just even if you can't spell it, just give it a go and it'll probably come up. You can also support the podcast by buying some merchandise at filmumentaries.creator-spring.com, including t-shirts, bags, bottles, and even socks. There's also an Etsy shop, Filmumentaries Etsy shop, where I sell prints of Jabba the Hutt's puppeteers for you to get signed at your next convention, maybe. I'll leave all the links for the Patreon for the shop and all the other things in the show notes. There is a link tree if you go on any of my social media platforms, you'll be able to find that, and it links to all of the other things that I have available, including free content on Vimeo, the book that you can purchase. I'll talk about that at the end. But as I say, please do subscribe, review the podcast. It's just me and my laptop and a guest, and I need your help to spread the word. Okay, so for this episode, number 87, the 1st of October 2023, I spoke to the British Film Institute's remastering and technical lead, Douglas Weir. Doug had recently introduced a screening of Jaws that I saw at the BFI back in June of this year. It wasn't just any old print of Jaws, it was a near pristine dye transfer print that a colleague of Doug's found in the archive. After the screening, which was amazing, I contacted Doug to see if he'd come on the podcast to talk about that print and about his career at the BFI. And it turned out he's already a listener of the podcast, which is always a bit of a thrill. And he was very keen to chat, so Doug invited me up to the South Bank-based BFI, and along with his colleague, I got a backstage tour, checking out all the old projectors and film reels. I've posted some photos on the Filmumentaries Instagram page if you want to have a look. Doug and I then sat down for an hour for a chat covering a multitude of topics, including what he does for his job, what projects he's worked on recently, what he's got coming up. Just a really nice guy. In fact, we've had a meet-up since, and he's going to be on the podcast again, hopefully later this month, with a colleague of his to talk about, well, let's just save that one. You'll see it as an extra bonus episode, hopefully. So here's my conversation with Doug Weir, remastering and technical lead at BFI, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. What is the remit of your job here, Doug?
Oh, wow. Well, I was chatting to somebody the other day and they said, oh my God, you wear a very big hat. The remit of my job, what I am employed for at the BFI is, as we were saying earlier, I'm the content remastering and delivery lead. So what I do is anything that the BFI distributes or has under ownership or a license, under license from somebody for distribution in cinemas on video publishing, so that's Blu-ray, DVD, streaming, video on demand, all those distribution platforms. If the BFI owns it, that's my responsibility technically to basically put it together.
Yeah.
So that could range from contemporary film, such as, trying to think of a film that we've released recently, Pretty Red Dress, which is a contemporary film that came out recently. We picked that up after a festival screening in Cannes or EO, the Jerzy Skolimowski film. I then take delivery of the DCP or the master file, and that's one of the easiest ones, because you take delivery of something and it goes out. But then we might work with somebody like Warner Brothers and decide that we want to re-release Get Carter, which is the other end of the scale. And then it's my job to work with Warner Brothers to access the original film materials, to have them remastered, restored, scanned, all the rest of it. And then at the other end, take delivery of a brand new 4K restoration that can be re-released into the cinemas.
Yep.
But what I also do is I will work with the video publishing team and produce projects if I want to. So I produced the Get Carter release. So that includes making new extras, deciding the artwork, commissioning people to write in the booklet, maybe writing in the booklet myself, commissioning commentaries, maybe doing a commentary myself, being an overall just keen nerd. But my background is film restoration, because my first ever job was at the National Film Archive. So the BFI is connected with the National Film Archive, which is up in Berkhamsted, and the National Film Archive is the largest collection of film material in the world. Now, I've just remembered that I was going to get a statistic this morning in my head for you, that it was going to be the Z number of film cap, but it's huge.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll try and work out a visit, because you'd really
Yeah, that would be great.
So my training and background is manual physical film restoration, pre-digital. I studied animation in Scotland, and it was all pre-computer. Like Pixar just brought out Toy Story, and it was all like, oh my God, have you seen what's just come out?
So what was that, 95?
No, I was a bit later than that.
Okay.
But Toy Story was still...
Sure.
It was the only real one.
Yeah.
I think Ants was coming out or something like that. It was like Woody Allen. I mean, even to think of it, Woody Allen doing that, it was like, what? But he did.
Yeah, it's kind of an anomaly, that one.
Yeah, but we had one computer in the animation studio, and it was running hot, do really simple little movements. But yeah, so that's my background. But I did animation because I wanted to learn about moving images, because I wanted to get into film restoration. And that goes, before that goes back to watching. I was allowed to get 2-3 videotapes per summer from a video catalogue. And I remember, this is my dad, you can have 3 videos for the summer. And I remember getting Rear Window, Lawrence of Arabia, and The Guns of Navarone. Wow. And each one of them, for the first time I'd seen this is like mid-90s, but about, 94, 95. They had little featurettes on them about the restoration. And then that's when I became aware that film falls apart, film fades, film needs to be looked after. And it also helped that my mum's a photographer. So I was already going in and out of film labs at that point, and I was just putting 2 and 2 together. I thought, I want to work in film, but I love old movies, and it just came together. And that's kind of how I've ended up here doing what I do. Kind of my perfect job.
Sounds like it, yeah. And we connected because the Film on Film festival that was here at BFI on the South Bank, I came along to see a print of Jaws.
That's right.
Which you introduced along with your colleague. And I was kind of, I'm a Jaws fan, and it's relevant, as I said to you earlier before we started recording, that I'm doing a documentary about the production design of Jaws. But having seen that print, it was like going back in time and seeing it with an audience which had people in it that hadn't seen the movie before.
Including my mum.
Including your mum, yeah. But just seeing it with that original colour timing, that original mono sound mix, with an audience, as I said, some of which had not seen it before, it genuinely felt like time travel, which is really what you do here. You kind of make sure that we can still see these films that are 50, 100 years old.
Absolutely. I mean, to give a little bit of background to that print, the whole Film on Film Festival, which ran for 4 days, and it, for anyone who's listening, it was 4 days of all celluloid, all print. So all rare, original, where possible, original prints. There were 1 or 2 prints that weren't original, but it came out of a project that the BFI is still ongoing, of creating a collection of film prints, a world-class collection of film prints preserved in the National Film Archive. And part of that project was to hold a festival where we can show off these prints that we've collected or these prints that we've made. And it's a really interesting project because there's two sides to it. One is auditing our own film archive to see what prints we hold, because there's a lot of material in there that we don't really know about. And then the other is working with our partners at the studios in, say, Hollywood, Warner Brothers, Paramount. We've got, good contacts with these archives. A lot of ex-colleagues. One of our ex-colleagues runs the Paramount Film Archive. To create new prints of their films. The curators at the BFI drew up a list of what they thought would be the perfect collection of new prints. So the Film and Film Festival came out of that. And the Jaws print was an interesting one because that came out of the audit. It was always in the National Film Archive. It had been there since 1987.
Right.
And I've done research since the screening to find out a wee bit more.
Yeah.
And I remember, so Roger and Derek Young, who I need to give a shout out to, and I gave a shout out to at the screening, they are two identical twin projectionists that worked at the BFI. They retired at the beginning of this year. They worked at the BFI. Roger, I know this because I interviewed him yesterday. Mm-hmm. He worked at the BFI since 1978, 79. No, actually, that's wrong, because he was projecting Apocalypse Now in 79 on 70mm. Wow. He said yesterday, if I could project one print every day, all day for the rest of my life, it would be that print. Oh. And he remembered the code number for the print. Anyway, he was still working with us a few years ago, and he phoned me up, and him and Derek had just been watching these prints, checking them, grading them, so that we could get a view of what we held. And he said, Doug, you've got to get down here. There's a print of Jaws I think you'd be interested in. And I mean, yeah, right, sure. And Jaws is really interesting because you said, I'm a big fan of Jaws. Who's not?
Yeah.
It's the perfect film, but it's also a film that I have actually not seen that much of, especially in the last, when was it? It gets almost re-released almost every summer now, but it got its first big re-release maybe 5-6 years ago when they did the first 4K.
Yeah.
Somebody listening to this will know better than me. But I remember seeing it and it looked incredible. It was, beautifully restored. I remember seeing a rope holding the boat in one shot and thinking, the restoration's so good you can see it. But I notice all these things. Anyway, but before then I hadn't seen it. It's one of these films I deliberately don't watch that many times. There's a handful of films like Raiders of the Lost Arks, that Spielberg's another one. The first Star Trek film, which I love. I avoid watching these films too many times because I don't want to become over familiar with them. I want to keep that freshness. And Jaws is one of them. And he said, come down and look at this print. And I'm like, okay. So I went to the screening rooms and he ran this reel of the print and I was, oh my God, I'm not going to swear, but I was like, holy F. This is amazing. And he said, yeah, it's a dye transfer print. I went, really? Yeah, it's a dye transfer print. And I only watched the first reel, and then the other people from the archive watched the rest of it and graded it and did the rest of it. But it stayed with me because it was just one of those sort of mind-bending experiences, which is when you watch a film on 35mm, even though you've seen it many, many times, your brain is watching it for the first time, because watching something digitally and watching something in celluloid are two very different, mentally, like to your brain, are two very different things. To your memory, they're the same, because you're watching Robert Shaw and you recognize him, but your brain's going, I'm watching something different because it's not digital, it's flickering, it's a flickering analog image. Yeah. So you register that, and it feels. I mean, we've done scientific tests years ago with a university, and they put a hat on somebody with wires, and then they showed people's brain patterns changing between watching digital and print. Right. So part of it was that. Part of it was having not seen Jaws for a long time. But the biggest part for me was the mono audio was just incredible. So that stuck with me for a while, and then they were putting together this film on film event. And they said, right, what are your ideas? Da, 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 da. And I sort of came in late in the day and said, I've got an idea. You should show Jaws. It's the summer. It's going to be the best summer we've ever had. But so they chose it for the closing night film and said, do you want to introduce it? I went, okay. So I have to wear two caps. I do a lot of introducing of things. I do a lot of public talking for the BFI. And I try and do a mixture. I don't like it to be too technical, but also informative and entertaining. That should be our slogan. But so I started doing my research into the print. And it was a really interesting bit of research because obviously it was a dye transfer print, and I found out that
Could you just explain what a dye transfer print is?
Sorry, that's a good question. Yeah. It's something that I actually don't feel I did very well in the evening because I was trying to, keep the audience entertained. But there was a guy in the audience, I don't know if you noticed, he was wearing a Jaws hat, a Jaws shirt, Jaws socks.
Oh, you saw me?
No, yeah. But I was on the tube going home, and as I said, my mum was with me. And I nudged my mum and went, look, and he was sitting across from us. There's that guy. Anyway, so he lives in Hammersmith. No, dye transfer is a process that was started by Technicolor, who we all know for the 3-strip process. The difference between a dye transfer print and a regular print is that the color for a dye transfer print, and I'm trying to keep this as simple, but not too technical. The color for a dye transfer print is actually printed on the surface of the film. The dye is transferred to the surface of the film. It involves black and white separations and all these sorts of things, and it involves a thing called a matrice. I get my pronunciation wrong. That's part of that transfers the dye to the surface of the film. Now, because the dye is layered on the surface of the film for the primary colors, there's no fading. Whereas Kodak film, the dye is layered inside the film and it's susceptible to fading.
Gotcha.
So, the yellow layers go and it turns pink. Yep. Which I have to work with a lot of that all the time. But so if you can find a Technicolor print, especially when you're doing the work that I do, I mean, one of the first things is just doing a whole lot of research when you're remastering a film. And if you find a dye transfer print, it's brilliant because you've got the original color timing right there. And then nobody can complain about how it looks. Because if you go on the internet, you'll notice there's a lot of people that complain about the colour of old movies. Yeah. I quite often they're right. That's the scary thing. Anyway, if you do your research, no one complains. So the dye transfer print of Jaws has the original colour timing and the original mono track. And these are things that people haven't seen in a long time. Because, as I said at the screening, Jaws, like the Star Wars films, is a popular film. And the more popular a film is, the more reversioned it is, the more remastered it is, and the further away it gets from its original version, so to speak. And I'm not saying the people that do the remastering haven't done a good job. They do a great job. So you can go out there and see Jaws. In fact, it was showing at the Glasgow Film Theatre on Monday. My mate went to see it digitally, and it looks incredible. And it's got your 7.1, your Atmos or whatever it is, and the colours approved by Spielberg and everything. But you're not watching the version that came out in 1975. You're watching something entirely different. Yeah. And it's a different experience. So hearing the original mono audio was incredible because you're hearing something and seeing something that people saw on the original night, that it came out. And because it's the dye transfer print, the colours are exactly the same. They haven't faded, they haven't shifted in any... There was a few little colour shifts in the print, I have to say, because it is old. Yeah. But 90% of it was great. There was a couple of dupe sections as well. But you'll find that a lot of prints that came out at the time had dupes put in and nothing was perfect. That's the other thing about 35mm. It was never perfect. People get it in their brain because of the way digital is, that if you go and see a 35mm print, it's going to be perfect. It's not. People should unwire their brain and remember that things weren't always perfect.
That's part of the charm of it, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
35mm.
And also, yeah, exactly. And also, watching Jaws digitally now, or any film digitally, you're watching the original negative, or maybe an interpositive, or something very close to in generation to the original negative. It was never designed to be seen like that. Yeah. There's a good story that I read years ago that when Superman, I think it was Superman or Superman 3, one of them, when they first remastered them for like DVD or whatever in the late 90s, Superman's flying somewhere and you can see his wires. And they'd gone from the original negative. It might not be Superman, I'm covering my tracks now, but it might not be Superman, but it was something with wires. And you could see the wires. That's because the process of creating a print using dupe negatives, and by the time it got to print, the grain would have not erased, but masked out the wires. And also the colour timing wasn't the same. they would have blown out the sky to cover up the wires as well. So these little things, you can get a really perfect image in digital, but sometimes it's too perfect.
Yeah.
So when you watch the print of Jaws, you factor that in. It would the rope that I saw on the DCP.
What was the origin of the print then?
So the print, going and looking on the database and doing my research, was the reason that we had it, and it was physically in such good condition. It was because it was an ex-broadcast print, and it had been at the BBC. It had been at ITV originally. So this is the further bit of research that I did afterwards. It had been so. Back in the day, let me take you back to the 1970s. When they picked up films for TV, quite often the studio would make prints for distribution, and then they make a print for broadcast. That print would go to the BBC or whoever had the broadcast rights. They would then telesay the print, make a tape, whatever tape format it would have been at the day, and that would have been broadcast. And then the print would go on the shelf. So one of the best collections we've got at the BFI National Archive is the BBC transmission prints, because they were all run once or twice, and they're all in really good condition. And a lot of them are dye transfer, especially this Jaws print. Because the reason the Jaws print is dye transfer is because in the late 70s, early 80s, not early 80s, the late 70s, mid to late 70s, they were still making dye transfer prints in Europe.
Right.
Whereas Jaws in the States, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but Jaws was never distributed as the dye transfer print in the States. That's why it's so rare. Right. It only exists in the UK, and if it exists in Europe, it might have subtitles on it or something. So this print is really rare. And the reason it's in such good condition is because it's an ex-transmission print. So my theory is the rights for transmission were originally with ITV.
That's right, yeah.
And then it ended up at the BBC, and then it came to us. So the BBC would have taken the rights at some point, used that print, would have gone to them, they would have telecined it, and then they'd have gone, we don't need all these prints anymore, and they'd have shoved them into the National Film Archive.
So it's just been telecined and put away.
Exactly. The projection history was 2 times it'd been projected at the BFI. Wow. I think. Sometimes the notes on the database are, you're missing things, but that's still nothing.
Yeah.
So what you saw, was in very good condition.
Amazing.
I always get it's the mono audio, that opening Universal shot with the weird underwater sounds. Just every time I see that print, the hairs on the back of my neck, just for that shot, and then shit. Yeah, but you don't get that with a DCP, and that's the weird thing. Yeah, you watch that digitally, and you go, "Oh, great, it's Jaws," but the print, for whatever reason, it's just that mono. You suddenly go, this is something else.
Yeah, and I was saying to you earlier when I was having a little behind-the-scenes tour here that mono mix also allows you to appreciate Spielberg's visual direction as well, because you do get this kind of wall of sound sometimes in that film because of all of the people talking over each other. Yeah, but his direction tells you where you should be looking.
Yeah, because the audio's not pulling you. Yeah, you're not going, oh, what's that noise over there? You're looking to see. It's the show don't tell thing, isn't it? Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. And the other important thing I like to tell people, because we get a lot of young people, work experience people coming in, I like to promote mono audio because 90% of what I do is with mono. And the Jaws mix, people think mono's inferior, but no. John Williams, I don't know who the sound person was on Jaws, you'll know. Oh, sorry, I'm testing you.
I don't really know who the sound person was, no.
But the Ben Burt of Jaws, the sound designer, and John Williams, all these guys in the sound mixer would have done that special mono mix. So that what you're hearing is specially mixed. It's not some kind of inferior byproduct or something. That's the way it was intended to be. Hard until, I guess, maybe they did the 70mm release and did 6-track stereo and did another mix. Yeah. This is the thing, when you watch Jaws now digitally, it does sound amazing, but there must have been, like Star Wars, and people have catalogued this, it's online, all the different mixes that these films have had over the years. That's what I love about the internet and people. Yeah. It's a hive of that information. We do a lot of work with films that have had 6 tracks. I remastered and restored a film earlier this year. It took 3 years to get it going, called Dance Craze, and it was a really great project. And it's a ska music concert film, and it was basically missing for 40 years. And it was a ska concert filmed on Steadicams. It had never been done before, so the Steadicams are going in amongst the specials and the beat and the selector and madness, and they're all in their absolute prime. And it was released on 70mm, and everyone had forgotten about this. And I met up with, I'm going to do a big name drop, I met up with Jerry Dammers during the pandemic because he wanted to meet me about something else. I had a cup of tea with him yesterday, actually, but when we were chatting about Dance Craze. And he said, oh, had you heard of this film Dance Craze? I went, no, I haven't. People have just forgotten about it. It just dropped off the face of the earth because it just wasn't available. And eventually we tracked down the only surviving 70mm print in the camera of the DOP's attic, Joe Dunton, who's a legend of the British film industry. And we scanned it. I found a 70mm scanner in the UK, and we scanned it, and it had the 6-track stereo.
Wow.
And we worked with Dolby, and we did all these different. We found the mono mix, the quad stereo mix, the 6-track stereo mix, and we made a new Dolby Atmos mix, and then re-released it. So sound mixes are really important, but I think it's important to, and it doesn't happen a lot these days, is to give people the option.
Yeah.
I'd love to have Jaws out in UHD with a mono mix.
Mm-hmm.
Some studios are doing it. You can buy the James Bond films in the States, and they've got like the mono mixes. I love that. But I'm not going to say no to a nice new mix, but yeah.
There's something about that sort of the iterative nature of filmmaking, isn't there, where, it would be released in a mono mix and then it might get a surround sound mix. And you sort of, that's what I think is great about like box sets like Blade Runner box set, where you've got the work print, you've got the version with the narration. Why not?
We were chatting about Blade Runner yesterday. Again, me and Roger, the projectionist, were chatting, and that was one of his films that he could project forever, is Blade Runner, because he projected the 70mm print back in the day, and he said, I could just project that forever. And we were talking about the different versions. I said, what's your favourite version of Blade Runner? He went, oh, the original. And he said, what about you? And I said, well, you know what? And this is shocking. I've only seen the final cut because I, for whatever reason, never saw Blade Runner until 2007.
Wow.
And I saw it at the GFT because it's got a great sound system, and it just blew my socks off. And I kind of don't want to see, I haven't seen the other versions because I thought that was really good. And sometimes I don't want to know about other versions to films. I want to just keep it the way it is. But to go back to the different sound mixes, and you're just facilitating an audience.
Yeah.
It's like 3D. Every so often 3D comes back because people want to see it, but also 3D comes back because there's a threat to the cinema. So it's you need to get people back into the cinemas. But the importance of the Jaws print, or what's important about the Jaws print, and what's important about what we do at the BFI with the Film on Film Festival and with our video publishing and with our re-releases, is to bring people back. It's like recentering yourself to say, here's Jaws the original way. It's like you've gone off in a tangent, seeing all the remastered, restored Laserdiscs, DCPs, re-releases, TV versions with adverts, all that sort of stuff. I, for years, used to think that films were square when I was a kid. They were 4:3. And at the end, when they pulled out to show you the letterboxing for the credits, I used to think that was normal. And I have this weird nostalgia for that now. But then I remember getting a VHS of The Italian Job in widescreen and going, holy crap, look how well composed that shot is.
And I've missed a third of the screen all my life.
Or on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I had a special edition VHS widescreen going, this looks like, you suddenly go, wow.
Yeah.
So to suddenly, everything's released in the right aspect ratio, you'd hope these days. But it's always good to sort of show these because people get to recenter themselves and experience that experience again. Because as I said at the evening, no matter how many times you've seen Jaws, most of the people in that cinema, unless they were there in 75 or the 2 times it was screened before, you ain't seen Jaws.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, as you said, the amount of people that hadn't seen it.
Yeah, it's about 30 or 40
I love that. I always do that when I introduce the film. Say, who hasn't seen this?
Yeah.
And the South Bank seems to attract a lot of people who are just going there on their gut feeling first time,
right.
or over recommendations. A lot of people go and see films they haven't seen before in the South Bank.
It was funny because I obviously I know all the cues in that film, having watched it a million times. So I was turning around and looking at the audience a couple of times just to kind of see their reaction to it. And people were genuinely jumping out of their seats.
There's a great photograph that I'll send you because one of our press people was taking photographs during the first 5 minutes.
Right.
Where the girl's swimming.
Yeah.
And it's this great photograph, and you've got the screen on the right, and it's lighting up the audience, and it's just the sort of feet dangling in the water, shot. And somebody in the audience is just, they know something bad's going to happen, and they've got this look on their face. I just zoomed into it. It was like,
white knuckle ride.
It better not be my mum, but my mum was jumping out of her seat, and people were really engaging with it. And it's great because, as I said before, you don't feel people engage with films like that when it's just a digital Saturday night screening. It was a real special screening.
Yeah. And just how funny that movie is as well, the amount of laughter that was going on in the auditorium.
And I picked up on things. I had like little jokes and lines I hadn't really noticed before. And also the ending when the shark blew up, everybody applauded and cheered. Yeah. And I felt kind of sad. I was like, I was going to say, you don't blow up Jaws. That's not the name of the shark. But I was thinking, they blew up Jaws. You don't applaud, you know. He'll be back another 3 times anyway. It doesn't matter.
Going back to the restoration side of things, I mean, you talked about, you know, how here you try and show films in their original format if you can. But in terms of like the Blu-ray releases that you've worked on, how do you sort of decide where that sweet spot is between what the director originally envisioned and what contemporary audiences now expect?
Well, I was going to give you this because I'm such a fan of the podcast, but I'm going to do this now because it could be a good example. I've got a little stash gift for you. And it's in a Tesco bag. I was trying to get a film on film BFI bag, but Dom's like, I've got a Tesco bag. It's like, that's why you're paid the big bucks. But these are some BFI releases for
amazing.
And they're a good example of the different things we do.
So we've got Nil by Mouth, Ghost Stories for Christmas, Get Carter. Oh my God. So 1984.
I hope you've got a 4K deck.
I have. No,
You have to have now.
Yeah, I'm getting one on the way home.
I'm going to cut it.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but what you got here, I tried to make it a good range of titles because 1984 and the Ghost Stories for Christmas, these are BBC.
Right, yeah.
So these are BBC, these are shot in 16mm, and I work with the BBC and we go back to the original negatives. So that's when Dom said earlier.
Yeah.
I was like, no, actually, no, they still don't have things that are restored. So we work with the BBC and I access the materials and we restore these. There's a volume 2 coming soon, just so people know. Nil by Mouth is a BFI archive restoration. 1984 was a restoration that we did in-house ourselves, and that had to be a reconstruction because it was tele-recorded materials and original negative materials. I mean, that's another podcast on its own. Each of these releases is a podcast on its own. I've already talked about Get Carter. That was a very big project. I got to meet Michael Caine. I spent a few hours in his living room recording the intro that he did there. He was a really, really nice guy. And Full Circles actually had nothing to do with. This is an example of a title that was restored by somebody else.
I don't know Full Circle.
Yeah, it's The Haunting of Julia is a title that a lot of people know.
Okay.
It's a great little film.
Great.
Big film.
Amazing.
They're all big films. But then, to go back to your question, to find that sweet spot, with Nil by Mouth and Get Carter, I guess, are the best examples here. Nil by Mouth, directed by Gary Oldman, we always get them involved, always. Get Carter, Mike Hodges, he was involved from the get-go. So what I do, I'm going to go back to Get Carter because Nil by Mouth, it was a colleague of mine that supervised that and worked with Gary Oldman, and we had access to all his collection of rushes and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. He was very, very accessible, really good, and he signed it off.
It means so much to him, that film, I'm sure.
It's a great film. I mean, it's a slog. It's a hard.
It is.
But it's great. Really, and it's beautifully shot. 16. I mean, I love 16mm. It's a beautiful 16mm film. Beautifully shot. Get Carter. So the process on this was, I had to sort of spin several plates at once. One of them was working with Warner Brothers, and they were great. They were really accessible. They allowed us access to the original materials, the original negative. They scanned it all at 4K, 16-bit, which is great, and it was fantastic. They were really great. So I have to manage that process and relationship, because working with a Hollywood studio isn't as simple as saying, all right, Joe, send it over.
Yeah.
There's politics involved, and that's fine. That's fine. You just have to go through it.
Yeah.
And we were working with George Fentelstein, who he's the guy that's behind the Warner Archive label, and also he's the Warner Archive historian. He's a really great guy, and he was really, really helpful in allowing us access to all the Get Carter material. But also working with Mike. And Mike, I mean, sadly no longer with us, but he was in his 90s, or I think he was in his 90s at this point. He was old. So what I would do is I take the scans to the lab then starts grading them and restoring them, and I'm there every step of the way, overseeing it. And then I would send a version to Mike. Then Mike would usually I'd try and get them in to watch it on the big screen and sit with them, but he was watching it on his TV, so I'd send him a link or a disc, and he'd come back. He came back with very few notes, actually, because, again, I did my research, and we had already original prints of Get Carter in the archive, one from, I'm going to get this right, 1971, and one from the re-release in the late 90s, and Mike was like that. The one from the late 90s is too cold, and then we've got the print from the 70s, which was faded, so from those two prints I could work out how it should look. And Mike, thankfully, came back and said, oh, there's only 2 shots. One of them was a 1-second shot of an exhaust pipe. He said, can you just make that a bit brighter? I was like, yeah. Sometimes directors can be really hands-on, and that's fine as well, but you've got to manage that. You've got to manage their expectation. You've also got to make sure they understand that we're not creating a new film here. This isn't a revisionist process, which happens a lot. I was at a discussion a few years ago about high dynamic range, HDR, and how it's this new tool in the restoration world. It's a very dangerous tool, because I don't want to go into the films of the people, but there were people talking about a big Hollywood film, and they were saying, we've now restored it in high dynamic range, and what you can see here are these clouds, and the DOP says, that's brilliant, can we have the clouds in, because we could never get them before. That's a fabulous thing to be able to do, but we ain't going to do it, because if I was restoring something like Jaws, I'd have that print out, and I'd go make it look like that.
Yes, yeah.
I know you can see different things here, because you can suddenly get a latitude of the negative out digitally, but it doesn't mean you should see it. So the ethical, the biggest thing is the ethical decisions you have to make. And when I have students coming in to talk to us about what we do, they say, so what do I need to do to get into this world, to get into this field of film restoration and remastering? And I say, you don't need to know anything. A lot of people are obsessed with equipment. A lot of people are obsessed with software, learning all the grading things. I said, look, I mean, I'm not a technical guy. I mean, I am a technical guy, that's my job, but I'm not a computer guy. I'm not an IT person. I'm not great at computers. I wear an analog wristwatch. I've only just got a smartphone. My best advice to them is just watch movies.
Yeah.
And if people like us are doing our jobs properly, you'll be seeing Get Carter the way it should look. And then you will be able to go and do that job. And when someone says, all right, how do you want me to do this? You'll be able to say, this is the way it should look. Because quite often these days, you're in a very dangerous period now where you've got, not dangerous, precarious, where HDR's around, AI is coming out. I had a question about AI recently. And you can do anything. You can get rid of all the grain. You can put a smile on someone's face. You can do whatever. And that's dangerous. And people are using that, and people are grading films in different colour time with different colour timing. They're redoing all the Foley effects in the audio. Big Hollywood films are being re-released with new Foley effects. That's what they're trying to do there is they're trying to package it up for a modern audience to make it relevant. Whereas that's not what we do. We want people to see Get Carter in mono, with the original colour type. Granted, it's from the original negative, and it's an HDR scan of the original negative. And I remember looking at the scans and thinking, wow, there's so much stuff here. But then going, let's hide it all.
Yeah, let's bring it back down.
Let's bring it back down to the way it was. Make it. Also, the audio, people complained about the audio, funnily enough, Get Carter, because they expected it to be really big. It's like, no, it's mono, it's coming out the centre speaker. This is it. But it was funny, some of the reactions, people expected it to be something else. Well, that was a funny one with that. There's one of the few projects where people have complained about that. But so working with the Mike Hodges, making sure they're happy, but also making sure that they can't do certain things. Because your job as someone who's remastering or restoring a film is to present it represent the film that the director achieved, not intended.
Yes.
And there's a lot of directors we can think of that need to learn that.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? With any artistic endeavor, at some point you release it into the world. I think people have this belief almost that Hollywood is, if they don't make the perfect movie, then they've not achieved their goal. But of course, these things are imperfect. You just, there's a time limit.
Absolutely. I'm one of my sort of little side hobbies is, I don't actually practice it, but I read about it and I've got books about it and I'm very interested in it. And is art conservation and art restoration, so paintings, objects. It's important to say that at the National Film Archive, films are treated as objects because it's a physical object.
Yeah.
When you restore a film, you restore the physical object. That's the restoration side of it. When you restore a painting, it's all about damage limitation, loss compensation. So you're restoring that. This is my theory anyway. The way I approach it is the restoration work happens to the physical reel of film. Then when it becomes digital, you're all of a sudden you're in it. That's a new version. It's a copy. Yeah. So you're remastering it. So when you restore a film, you repair. So we often get films that are in pieces or don't exist in a single version. So you have to get copies from all over the place, then compile the best print or the best negative and scan that.
Yeah.
So that's the restoration bit. And then you've got digital preservation, which is hugely important as well, which but that is one of the outcomes of what I do, but I've got colleagues whose sole job, and it's a very, very impressive and very big job, is the conservation of digital assets, raw scans, but at the end of the day, the film material is always preserved. It's always maintained. The digital will always be remastered. Whenever there's another resolution or another whatever, we'll do it again and again and again, because that's how you make money. But that is to answer your question about the Hollywood thing is you've got to respect the original film. So that's why you get a release of Blade Runner with multiple versions, because they go, well, this was my idealized version, but here's the original, and that's the way it should always be. Because you've got to respect the original, you've got to preserve the original object. That's right, I was talking about art conservation, art restoration. Yeah. And if you're restoring a painting, you never finish it off, And how many times have we seen in the press? Remember the monkey Jesus?
Yeah.
I'll just put a big smile on you because it's missing. But if they've got a film and there's a section missing, you don't shoot that scene or create it with AI or anything like that. That's just what I was asked recently. Would you create shots with AI? And
interesting.
I'd say absolutely not. I said AI is going to be an incredibly powerful tool, but what to me it'll be really good for is very precise, targeted restoration. So the repair of a tear, the digital removal of mold, for these little things. But I don't want to take you and shoot a new scene with you, or if I don't think you've maybe got a bruised. I don't want to change you in any way because that becomes visual effects. Which is what I want to talk about, because restoration is a huge bedfellow of visual effects, digital restoration.
I interviewed Peter Curran, who worked for Lucasfilm back in '76 in visual effects, and he won an Oscar following Return of the Jedi for a technique that ended up being used in film restoration. It was something to do, if I remember rightly, it was something to do with creating the lightsabers for Return of the Jedi in daylight, because previously they'd been in, controlled lighting rooms. Yeah. And they were out in the middle of the Yuma desert, and he had to do the visual effects on that. And what he used was like a color restoration technique almost, which then became a technique to restore color film.
Color retrieval.
Yeah.
I think, color retrieval is really, I meet lots of people and they say, oh, you'll just be colorized. Genuinely people do say that. You'll just colorize everything now. Or I saw that Peter Jackson thing, you did that. And they go, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what we should be doing. But color retrieval is really interesting because it can be used for a film that's heavily faded. Yeah. You can use the color retrieval because it was originally a color film.
Yeah.
So I've read about that as well. And visual effects, ILM, going back to when I was a kid, and I'm guessing this is the same with you, I was a total visual effects nerd. Mm-hmm. I had that. If I had it out the other day in anticipation for this, I still got it. the ILM, the Art of Visual Effects coffee table book, and then there's the Into the Digital Realm.
Yes. Yeah.
The Digital Realm one's in a box in Scotland, but the Art of Visual Effects is in my flat here in London, and I was reading it, and that was my portal.
Yeah.
And it was, because when in the early 90s, there was nothing. There was no internet. This was the best thing. I was reading that, and when I was a kid, there's a sort of magic to movies. Just filming somebody having a chat is a magic to that. I've got a 16mm camera in my office, and it's clockwork. It's not a Bolex. It's a Krasnogorsk K3 for anyone listening. I've got a little collection of film cameras, and again, when students come in, they've never handled film or seen a film camera before, and I like to say, hold that, look at it, play with it. What do you think? He's like, it's a great lens, yeah. They open it up. I said, look, there's a bit of film, hold that. Now look through there, you can see through the gate. Right, now pull the button, you can hear it, and I'll say, right, that's clockwork. There's no battery in that, there's nothing. That's pure analog, it's pure chemistry, and you could possibly, under the right conditions, get a better image from that than some of the most expensive digital cameras. Yeah. And that goes back to the ILM thing. You watch those guys in the 70s and 80s, and we've seen the Disney documentary, we've read the books, we're fanboys. There's magic. They're just inventing it. They're inventing it. Oh, we need this. It's like Don was saying earlier. If something breaks in the projector, we just build it. Yeah. They were just like, I need to do this in this film. All right, we'll build it. We need to make this thing called Morph. We'll make it digital software. So the tools that they invented, we now use as a standard practice. So when Get Carter was scanned digitally, scanned at 4K DPX, that's a frame sequence file format. You can trace that right back to the ILM Kodak scanner from the late 80s. Right. They developed a scanner with Kodak so that they could scan film to digital, so they could apply digital effects more easily. Because I remember watching, I think it was an extra on the Star Trek 2 DVD, Blu-ray, that for the Starscapes in that film, they literally filmed a monitor. That's how they transferred it to film. Yeah, okay. But then in the late 80s, they created this scanner, and I was reading about it not in this book, because I think it's mentioned in the book, but then I looked at it online, and there's a whole list of the films. It was used in almost every ILM film until the late 90s. Yeah. So I think Star Trek 6, and then the Die Hards, and all these films. So that was the first real film scanner, and that's what we use today to scan fragile film. We've adapted it. There's wet gate techniques, which is putting a gate on it that fills with fluid that you can put the film in, and the fluid fills in all the imperfections on the film and gets rid of the scratches. So it's been adapted by people like Ari and Scanity and all these people. But the other thing that is the software, the visual effects software for removing things. Wire removal software that they invented is the grandfather of the software that we now use to remove scratches. Yeah, right. It's the same thing. Interesting. So it's all visual effect. Yeah. And I think that's where my first interest in what I do came from. I was really into visual effects, and I was thinking I'm glad I didn't get into it, because I was really interested in model making and the practical effects, and I'd have been out of a job, in like 10 years. But then watching those VHSs and seeing film restoration and going, well, how does this all mix together? And when I first started, and when I was a teenager, it was all still photochemical, and we were still restoring films by reprinting them onto different stocks and grading them photochemically through optical printers and using the optical printers. And then I've seen the arc from using optical printers, and it was suddenly 10, 12 years ago, no more tapes, digital. It was all digital, and that's where we are now. Yeah. We've still got optical printers at the National Film Archive, and we do still use them to make duplicate elements for preservation. But there are beautiful, I haven't really tell people this, but when I was a kid, I used to draw optical printers. And I remember showing my granddad.
I did the same thing.
Yeah. I used to draw. There are things of beauty, and we've got a beautiful it's Oxbury, this huge optical printer. And if anyone's listening, it's like the ones they have at ILM, the quad printer or whatever. Was it the Anderson printer? See, I know the names of them all, But we've got several of those at the National Archive, and every time I go up there, my colleague Kieran is like, "Oh God, here he goes." I'm like, "Oh, can I see the optical printer? I can smell the gearbox oil. It's great." And I remember showing my granddad a drawing of an optical printer that I'd done when I was like 12 or something.
Yeah,
and he's like, "I don't know what this is, but it's very impressive."
Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things I wanted to talk about as well is, of course, when you produce these Blu-rays and DVDs and things, is the special features. Now, that's something that's very close to my heart, the extras, the documentaries, the commentaries, because that world has kind of ebbed away a bit over the years, but it seems to be having a bit of a comeback because people now, I think, are a bit more savvy about curating their own collections of their favourite films, because I think there was that period of time where everybody thought, well, it's going to be on Amazon or Netflix or Disney Plus, and actually it's not. It's been retired and the extras aren't there anyway.
It's a very interesting market that we've got into. And I say this purely from, this is just purely from my insider perspective, looking out the way. And it's a very interesting, because we've got people at the BFI who know about the marketplace and they know exactly how much money is made in different places. But from my perspective, I think a unique view from the inside is that I totally understand what the studios are doing. It's business. It's commerce. It's like, well, we don't need that anymore. Let's just dump it all here and make them pay for that. Sure, because most people will, and most people want to. What I disagree with is saying, well, you can watch Get Carter on, what is it, HBO Max, the Warner one. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. It's like, oh, well, I'm paying my £5 a month for something and then it's gone. It's that control that I think that's not right. I think it's Disney just took all of Willow off and lots of other things. Things just disappear. And obviously, again, people say, oh, I can't believe they did that, but that's a purely business decision. Yeah. It's a commercial decision. With the Blu-rays and the DVDs, you're right. So 15 years ago, you could get a DVD of everything. You could buy box sets of Dad's Army, you could buy box sets of the Carry On films, you could buy a box set of the Normal Wisdom films. I don't know why I'm choosing these. Well, no, actually, I do know why I'm choosing these. You're not going to buy a DVD set of the Normal Wisdom films. You might for your granddad or your dad, because you've got a BritBox and they're all on there. Yeah. But for Get Carter or for Nil by Mouth or 1984 or Dance Craze or Gregory's Girl, which is coming out soon, you've got a market there who want to. These are films that are big enough and special enough to warrant a limited edition, deluxe edition, boutique release, and the market is still there. The sales are still there.
Great.
The big studios, they go, well, the sales aren't there for Spider-Man. Of course they're not there for Spider-Man, because the majority of people who want Spider-Man are people who just want to watch it on Saturday night with a pizza, or kids who want to watch it on Saturday morning with their breakfast.
On their phone.
On their phone, exactly.
Yeah.
But if you release Spider-Man on a special edition, limited edition Blu-ray, I don't know how many Spider-Man films are. This is a bad example. You're going to have to do all of them.
Yes.
And you're going to have to make 1 million units or whatever, and that's hugely expensive. Whereas Get Carter, there would be, my colleague will be able to tell you roughly, but this is off the top of my head. This actually sold very, very well. It continues to do very, very well. But you're talking thousands of units. Not even tens of thousands.
Nearly.
Thousands of units. But they sell.
Yeah.
And, in Get Carter, I'm holding it here. You've got a book, you've got a poster, you've got brand new extras. People buy it and they do well. And, we don't price it too much, too high. I'm totally plugging the BFI Blu-ray label.
I'm looking forward to watching it.
But it is. And the other thing that's important to say about these films is that this is probably the last physical release they'll get.
Yeah.
So this is probably the last release of Get Carter that'll have all these extras. It might be, in the UK, it might get released in another territory, but they're going to take our restoration and our extras and just release it in that territory. But this is in the UK or wherever else. This is the last version of that film. It will be on streaming. I'm not sure this 4K version's on streaming yet, but it's definitely going to streaming in the States. So yeah, that's the other important thing, is to do this while you still can.
Yeah. And
there still is an audience. And the landscape for physical media in the UK right now is as healthy as it's ever been. We 20 years ago, when I first started collecting DVDs, you had to import DVDs of your horror films and all that, because some of them were still banned, to be honest. but also the best editions were coming out abroad. Now the best editions are coming out in the UK because you've got Arrow Video, you've got BFI, you've got Indicator, you've got all the other ones I can't remember, Second Sight, Second Run, all these great labels, 88 Film, there's loads of them. And they're all run by guys or women or whoever. They're all tiny little teams. Here we've got 5, 6 people.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't work solely for them. I have to cover lots of other bases. So my team work with a video publishing team to come up with all the physical, the audiovisual assets. But the market is still really healthy. And as long as that continues, great. Because we've got a release schedule going forward for the next year or so. That's really good.
we walked past in the foyer, we walked past the big standy poster of Gregory's Girl, and you mentioned it a minute ago. Tell me about how that project went and some of the sort of challenges involved with restoring a film of that age.
Gregory's Girl, as listeners can probably tell from my accent, is a special film. I was recently, there's a film director called Murray Gregor, who's a very important figure in the Scottish film industry or Scottish film history. He's kind of he's not Forrest Gump, I was going to say he's not Forrest Gump, but he's kind of the Zelig of the Scottish. He's the man that it all kind of goes back to, or everyone, all roads lead to Murray Gregor. And he recently called me the national film, Scotland's national film ferret. So for the past, God knows how many years, I've been sort of quietly pushing Scottish cinema. It's kind of my thing, obviously. And Gregory's Girl feels like it's not the end of the road because there's still a few more films that I've got on my list. But it's definitely one of the biggest ticks to get restored and re-released. And it's a film, unlike the rest of the films that we've put out that are Scottish or have been put out by other companies that I've had something to do with. This is probably the one that has always been available. Like Get Carter, you can always watch Get Carter. Gregory's Girl's on ITV3 like every week. But to restore it actually was one of the more straightforward projects, to answer your question really quickly, because the original negative was kept really well. It was in really good condition. But it's an interesting one because the Scottish films, there's a goodwill around Scottish cinema that I don't find anywhere else. And people come out of the woodwork and go, oh, I worked on that, or I know so-and-so, or can I come, or this is great. And every time you release a Scottish film or re-release a Scottish film in Scotland, it does so well. The people turn out for it. So Gregory's Girl, we're doing a launch event on the 17th of August, and most of the cast is going to be there. And then it's running for a week or so at the GFT. That's longer than any other cinema is going to be running it for in the UK because it's going to sell. Scottish audiences love Scottish cinema. And, I work closely with all these guys, and I've become to know them all as friends, all these like Bill Forsyth and all these guys, and the actors. And the amount of goodwill that comes out of Scottish cinema is great. And it just seems to be a never-ending... Every time I work on something like That Sinking Feeling or Gregory's Girl or a film called Long Shot, which is a kind of lost, forgotten Scottish film, but the BFI, we re-released it on Blu-ray. Something else comes along. You think, well, that's them. And then you go, well, no, there's another one comes along and another one comes along, and then someone phones you up and says, have you got this? Can you do this? And you got another one. These things just come out of nowhere. So Gregory's Girl's the latest one and one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest, because it's the one everyone loves. I mean, it's like Jaws. Who doesn't like Gregory's Girl?
Yeah, it's impossible.
It's impossible to say, I don't like it. I find it offensive. So there's nothing. Nobody said that, by the way. But it's but that release has been great. And somebody asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, I didn't know you were," because it's already getting a lot of press in Scotland. And I was in Scotland last week, and they said, "Oh, what are you working on at the minute?" I said, "Oh, Greg." They go, "God, I didn't know you had anything to do with that. I read about that in the paper." I went, "Oh, yeah." He said, "What are you doing on that?" And I started to think about it, and I went, "Well, I supervised the restoration. I'm on the commentary. The artwork is from a poster in my own poster collection, and I've commissioned the essays. I've written a piece. So I've done a bit of everything, So I've kind of done it all. And again, that goes back to what do you do? everything. No, I don't do everything. But it is, when there's a project like that comes along, you have to get involved because you're a fan. It's like everyone that works at the BFI loves movies.
Yeah.
It's like not everyone that works in the job they do loves.
Yeah, and you can really feel that with what you do here. There's that kind of that curation, that level of curation, and that feeling of having hands on something is really obvious here. And
we have meetings where I'm constantly going places, film festivals, or meeting people like yourself who'll say, "Have you heard of this film?" And I go, "No, I haven't." Then you watch it and you go, "This is great." And then I'll have a meeting with some people here and they'll say, "How about this?" And then you'll find like a year later we're restoring it and re-releasing it. And it's a really nourishing environment like that. And it's very, very lucky to have an environment like that because a lot of my peers don't have that. It's a very structured and, regimented, system. But it's great like that, very open. We're working on potential new Blu-ray labels for next year for experimental cinema and also like these are risks that other companies wouldn't take, but we can because we're an arm's length government body and we've got funding and we make money as well, so we can take risks like that. And Get Carter, I keep coming back to Get Carter. I mean, this came out a year ago, but Get Carter is a great example in that Warner Brothers, when this goes back to a conversation I had on Zoom when we were in the pandemic. I thought I'd never used Zoom before, but then I realized I could have face-to-face conversations with people I'd never had conversations with. And I was looking for materials, funnily enough, on Dance Craze. And I had friends in the States who said, "Oh, why don't you speak to these people at labs in the States?" Because it was distributed here. And then through them, I got chatting to people at Warner Brothers and then the BFI. And then when we were working on Get Carter, the guys at Warner's were saying, we've had a lot of people approach us from the UK who want to restore and re-release Get Carter over the years. A lot of other distributors want to do it, but we've always said no. But we want to do it with you guys because you've been around as long as Warner Brothers have been around since the 30s, but also you bring a whole other layer to the re-release. It's more, there's the preservation, there's also, the cinema. You get a cinema re-release, you get the Blu-ray, you get everything, and also the press, and it's more of a reappraisal, and it's on an artistic level. Yeah. It's not just a commercial thing. We don't want to just put it out on Blu-ray and forget about it and make money. Yeah. We want to make sure the audiences enjoy it and experience it and read about it and can learn about it. There's the education side to it. We bring a lot to these packages, as you can see if you buy Get Carter on Blu-ray and DVD and Gregory's
don't have to,
and Nil by Mouth and all these things. But yeah, there's the learning side to it. It's a curated package, as you'd say.
I really appreciate what you do, here at BFI. I come up here quite a lot, not as often as I like.
It's not just me. There's a lot of people that do everything. Well, you met Dom earlier. There's the projection teams, one of the biggest projection teams in Europe, and maybe the world. So all these guys, and there's the video publishing team, as I mentioned, there's a whole team for theatrical distribution. There's a whole team of curators for the National Film Archive. There's a whole team of people. And as I said before, we all feed in ideas, we all enjoy it. We're excited about it. Excited about Barbie showing an NFT one this afternoon. But
No, but I really wanted to just say thank you for what you do, and thank you for giving your time today.
No, and I'm saying thank you to you by giving me all these because I really enjoy your podcast.
Well, that was a surprise to me. Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Doug there. As I said, I've managed to meet up with Doug again recently, and what was meant to be like a 20, 30-minute catch-up turned into a 2-hour chat over several cups of tea. Thanks to Doug for his time. And like I said, he'll be back. Not like the Terminator. Well, maybe like the Terminator, but just Scottish. The Terminator. Enough of that. A reminder that the BFI is well worth a visit. They show so many great movies, new and old, and you can check out their site, or maybe next time you pass, pick up a program and see what's coming up. The next episode is a little bit up in the air. There will be one. I'm hoping to get some of the creative brains from Gareth Edwards' new film, The Creator, on the podcast. So fingers crossed that happens in the next few days. But if that doesn't come off, I still have some fantastic guests waiting in the wings. I have the creature creator Tom Spina, as well as Skywalker Sound's Max Smith. I've also got a couple of episodes in the bag, like let's call them archive episodes that might sneak their way in before Christmas. Finally, a quick reminder that you can buy the book co-authored with Justin Berger on Amazon in your region. It's The Return of the Jedi Unauthorized Timeline. It catalogues the entire history of Return of the Jedi from 1976, yep, it goes that far back, until 2023, its 40th anniversary. You can buy it by looking on Amazon and searching for Return of the Jedi Timeline. In fact, it comes up if you just search for Jedi Timeline, or you can visit jeditimeline.com and see where it's available in your Amazon region. We're actually running this at a low price at the moment, so I think if you're in the UK, it's just about over £20 for the paperback. If we get it any lower than that, we'll be making no money on it. Justin and I are going to be earning about $1.50 each off the book at that price. But we've lowered it to try and get it out to more people, because what's the point in making the book if it's not going to get customers? So if everybody that listened to this podcast could just buy a copy, that would be awesome. And it would make it worthwhile, having spent, a year making it. We did put a lot of effort into making this book, and I'd really like you all to take a look, if you could. $20, and that money that I make from it, that tiny amount, that $1.50 each copy sold, will go straight into the kind of Filmumentries pot, which I use, for doing things like going up to London to interview Doug for this episode. That was paid for by your contributions via Patreon and so on. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so for the next episode of the Filmumentries podcast.